Hello and welcome to another Tundra Connections webcast with Polar Bears International. We are live streaming from EV Tundra Buggy 1 on the shores of Hudson Bay. We've been watching polar bears all morning and we are very excited to show them to you. Today our webcast is talking about building a bigger and better bear-safe toolbox. People and polar bears living together. We'll talk for about 30 to 40 minutes today and we would love your questions. Wherever you are watching from, if you can put your questions in the chat, whether that's YouTube or Facebook, or you can also email us at questions@pbears.org and we'll try to get to as many as we can today. So my name is Elise McCall. I'm a staff scientist at Polar Bears International and I am joined by two wonderful guests today. We'll start with the guest on my right. Kyle, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, my name's Kyle. I'm a bear biologist studying novel deterrence with polar bears. Historically, I've been able to work with black bears and grizzly bears in the lower 48 of the United States in California, Montana, Wyoming, and Idaho.
Great, thank you. And my colleague, Jeff.
Hi, my name is Jeff York. I'm the Senior Director of Science and Policy for Polar Bears International. I've been working on polar bears for 27 years, former chair of the Range States Conflict Working Group, and conflict has been a big part of my job, I'd say, for the last couple of decades.
Great. So we have some experts here in what it takes to live with polar bears and stay safe in bear country. So again, please do send us your questions. So we'll start today by just giving you a little bit of context. And I was hoping, Jeff, you could explain why are we where we are? Why are there bears here right now?
Sure. So as Elisa said, we're here on the shores of Western Hudson Bay. And if you look at a map of Hudson Bay, you'll see that there's kind of an east-west coastline here. And what that coastline does is it catches ice that's drifting down from the north, and it's also being carried by this counterclockwise current that's bay-wide. So it's bringing ice around, and this is one of the places it gets hung up. It's also an area that has a couple of large river systems that are pumping out fresh water. Fresh water freezes before seawater. This time of year, if you were to take an aerial view of the Churchill River, it would look like an ice machine. Especially with the outgoing tide, you'd see all this freshwater ice being pushed out. And the near shore, northerly winds tend to keep that ice near shore, and it starts ice forming into the bay.
Absolutely, and those polar bears want that sea ice because they're ready to get out there and hunt some seals. They've been fasting on land throughout the summer for the most part, and as soon as that sea ice comes in and sticks around, the bears will be gone. But this is such a special time of year where we can watch them. We had 3 polar bears right around us this morning. We know there's many more out there, and we will also be sharing clips with you from the last few days. It's a really wonderful time of year to be here, and there's a reason that Churchill, Manitoba is called the polar bear capital of the world, and that they really are coexisting with these polar bears. And Kyle, I was hoping that you could talk a little bit about what is human-bear coexistence. What does that mean?
Yeah, I mean, it can mean a lot of things, but if we weren't coexisting with these bears, we wouldn't be able to have these awesome experiences and be able to show other people and teach them and then have them come up and join us and have the experience as well. But I think the best thing would be to define it as living in these remote areas that bears have lived for long times and being a responsible person. Living there, taking care of your trash or other attractants, not feeding any animals, especially bears, and really finding ways to minimize your impact on their home range.
Absolutely. So Kyle, we did have a question already from Chris. What are the best ways that we, meaning concerned wildlife appreciating members of the public, can see or experience polar bears in the wild without negatively impacting their behavior or environment? Is it possible?
Yeah, I think it's possible. You know, it goes back to that responsibility, giving them their space, keeping a safe distance, taking your time, making sure you know your surroundings. And I don't know. I think, you know, letting them have their alone time also, not just follow them around all day, every day, but really being able to make sure that they're acting wild and living their lives like if you weren't there, I think is a good method of approach.
Right. And when we are out here in Churchill, for example, on EV Tundra Buggy 1, we're out here with a company, Frontiers North Adventures. They are trying to operate as sustainably as possible. We are up away from the bears. We're safe. The bears can be in this area, but they can also choose not to be. So any bears that don't like this buggy activity, they're long gone, and then many bears, it doesn't bother them, or maybe they're even a little bit interested, so they stick around. And being respectful to the bears is always very, very important to us.
Yeah, and we saw that curiosity this morning with those 3 female bears that just came in, and they inspected pretty much every buggy and gave them a good look over.
Yeah, they were very interested. So Jeff, I wanted to ask about, so we mentioned we're going to talk a little bit today about safety tools, and there's a wide variety of safety tools, and well, let's just kick it off. So Churchill is a great place to develop and use some of these tools for coexistence, because we know there are polar bears here. We can test things and try things and see what works. And so I was wondering if you could just start with some of the things you have on your desk and talk through, especially you as a polar bear biologist going out to work amongst polar bears. What are you taking with you?
Sure. And when we talk about safety tools, we're talking about what we call deterrence, and it can be a broad range of things, right? So it can be something as simple as a flashlight. Ideally a very bright flashlight. This one's about 7,000 lumens. You wouldn't want to look at it directly, but bright light in the context of a predator like a bear, a polar bear, temporarily takes away one of their senses, and they really don't like that. So it's one way of saying, hey, you know, maybe you should rethink what you're doing there, and I'm not something you want to get closer to. So something as simple as a flashlight can be super effective. On the low end of the scale too, just a standard whistle. You know, these are whistles that don't have a ball inside, so we don't have to worry about them freezing or hanging up. They're quite loud, and again, this does 2 things. So one, it might break off a bear's behavior if it's being curious, just again make it think twice about coming closer to you. It also lets people know something's going on, that you might need help. So it's a way to both signal the bear and signal other people that might be around. With that. And then you get into like some more serious tools here. Probably the most common in a North American context, US and Canada, would be something like bear spray, pepper spray. This is incredibly effective. The nice thing about this is it takes very little training. Most of us can learn to use this quite quickly. We can carry it on us. They make all sorts of holsters for these. This is one that just goes around your waist, so it's always right in front of you, easy to grab. Yeah, this one works well on all 3 North American bear species, including polar bears. Up here we just have to make sure we keep it warm, that it doesn't freeze. And then we get into what we call our pyrotechnic sorts of devices. So this is just a standard handheld marine signaling flare. You hold safely down here. It gives you a quick way to ignite it. You rip the cord, and then you have a 60-minute, essentially a blowtorch that you're holding in your hand that again is quite bright. It's very visual, and it's very hot. So very unlikely that any bear is going to approach you with this in your hand. It's going to be something that they're not comfortable with. You know, it's not common to their way of thinking. And then I would say lastly, we get into things that are pyrotechnics that are propelled from a launcher. And these launchers could be little handheld pin bangers. They could also be launchers that look like firearms, and they can also be firearms. So some guns can handle certain rounds that are very similar to what we would shoot off at celebrations, you know, like a firework. So some of these go out from the launcher and they'll make a loud bang. Some of them will have a loud visual flash, and some of them will have like a screamer with a trail of sparkles behind them, so the bear can see that this thing is coming at you and bears really don't like people throwing fireballs at them, and that also tends to get their attention.
That's great. Yeah, so these sorts of tools are non-lethal, or at least less lethal, but this is what we want as much as possible for polar bears. We want to keep as many polar bears in the wild as we can. We want people to stay safe. So these are all excellent examples of tools that anyone can bring out into bear country for any bear species, actually. And we highly recommend that you do if you're heading into bear country. We could talk a little bit higher tech, and Kyle, you also have a tool. I hope you can show us what you've brought for show and tell today.
Yeah. This is our handy dandy drone. What we're doing now is currently trying to see how effective, if effective, it is in kind of moving polar bears around out of places that might have high conflict with humans. And what we're seeing is they really don't like being flown at. We've seen some research already done on brown bears and grizzly bears in the lower 48, but to my knowledge, I haven't seen any publications about drones and polar bears, so we're trying to figure out if it's effective, if they live in too rugged of an environment where the batteries don't last long enough to make it effective. And so far, it seems to be working pretty well. I wouldn't want them flying at me, that's for sure.
Right, and one thing I found interesting when you were flying the drone yesterday, just testing it, is that it takes teamwork to fly a drone.
Yes.
It's not just you going out, flying it wherever, but can you talk about the whole process and working as a team to make this happen?
Yeah, I think when you're flying a drone, it's very easy to just think of that and only that and not really be aware of your surroundings. So typically when we go out flying drones, we'll have a couple people, one to help watch for bears and watch the drone, and then we'll have a bear guard with one of our mini deterrents that Jeff just laid out, kind of scanning around, and then you have the pilot who's focusing on hazing the animals, pursuing them until we know that they're in a better, safer spot for them, and making sure we cross all of the T's and dot the I's for safety.
Great, thanks Kyle. So these were kind of great tools, concrete tools that people can go out and use, but there are other types of tools as well that can be a little more broad or community level tools. So Jeff, I was hoping you could talk a little bit about some of the other things we've done in Churchill, for example with the Churchill Bear Smart Working Group that might not seem as cool and exciting as the pyrotechnics, but that are very important.
Sure, no problem.
Yeah.
And I did want to add too that as we went through all of these, there are kind of two levels of tools. So there are the tools that you and I might carry if we're living in bear country, going on a hike, things like the flares, the bear spray, the flashlight, the whistle. And then there are tools professional wildlife managers use, and those are more of the pyrotechnics, tools that might make contact with an animal, and then definitely the drone there. But when we think about community-wide things that we can do, the most important one is education. And so education is a tool in terms of coexisting with bears, and so making sure communities have education materials that are appropriate to them, that are appropriate to their laws, and that are in the appropriate language is super important. I think from there you can step up and do an assessment of a community that's in bear country and say what's missing, what's present, or is there adequate lighting? Do they have ways to store waste that are bear resistant? So in Churchill, we actually did that. We brought up consultants. They did a bear safety assessment of the town for the Churchill Bear Smart Working Group. From that, we started a work list, a punch list of things to do, and right at the top was getting bear bins out in the community, so bear-resistant trash bins there, and education was a piece of that. A new safety video was part of that. And now we're also looking at what else can we do on the waste management side here to make sure bears aren't accessing human garbage in places like the landfill.
Absolutely. So I think we are going to take a minute. We do have a clip of that safety video Jeff mentioned. It is available on churchillbearsmart.ca and it's on YouTube. But there were several videos made and edited all together, but we'd like to show you a little clip here so you get kind of a sense of what we mean by a bear safety education clip.
How fast do you think you are? Have you won any medals recently? The average person can run about 8 kilometers an hour. But a polar bear can run faster than an Olympic athlete, more than 40 kilometers an hour. So you do the math and never approach a polar bear.
Great, thank you for that. So those were local Churchill kids that helped us make that video. We're super grateful. It really does take a community working together on some of these tools, and it's very fun when we can work with the locals on that.
Yeah, and I would just add too,
Yeah.
a key ingredient to success with communities is leadership. And we've been super fortunate in Churchill to have strong leadership from the mayor and town council in supporting these activities.
Absolutely. So actually, Jeff, this is great. We had a question from Chase. Chase asks, what are some other organizations that PBI collaborates with to pursue research? So some great examples in Churchill.
Great
and
examples in
beyond.
Churchill are right here with us,
Yeah.
collaborating
True.
with university partners like Brigham Young University. In Canada, we have a host of university partners we work with, from University of Alberta, University of Manitoba, York University, University of Toronto, McGill University.
Yep.
And then, of course, our government partners. So
Yes.
we work with all levels of government, from communities like Churchill, Province of Manitoba, Ontario Ministry of Natural Resources, and then the Canadian federal government here in our current context.
Right. So we like to say at Polar Bears International that we're small but mighty, and the mightiness really does come from working together collaboratively, internationally, in fact. And one of the great tools we've also used, I guess we can call it a tool, is knowledge sharing. And we have brought communities together that live with polar bears in different areas and had them talk about polar bear tourism, polar bear safety. So we've brought Norwegians from Svalbard, Norway, over to Churchill last year. And this year we brought Churchillians up to Svalbard, Norway. And in this way they can see these different parts of the world where polar bears and people coexist together and learn from each other. And we find that that is a really powerful tool, just people talking to people. Yeah, it takes a lot of teamwork and collaboration. Jeff, here's a question I'll also throw to you. What are some implications of AI in polar bear work? And I think this ties into coexistence potentially too.
It does. So we'll talk about kind of both sides of AI in that respect. AI, on the positive side, clearly provides this ability to quickly look at large data sets, full stop. So to be able to dig into some of our metadata there and look for patterns and do some analyses that would have taken, massive amounts of time, if they were even possible just a few years ago, is helpful. From a coexistence standpoint, we're actually using AI and some of our early detection tools like BearDAR, possibly video soon, to not just help us detect polar bears, the radar is doing that, but to say what we're detecting. So teaching the AI system to say we're interested in things that look like this, in our case things that look like a polar bear. And so that's been super exciting. The other side of AI that we have to take into account as a conservation organization is AI takes a lot of power and a lot of water. And so it has impacts, and it has climate impacts specifically that we need to just be aware of.
Thank you. It's so true. And I want to go back to the collaboration and this idea of learning new things as well, and ask you, Kyle. So Kyle's a graduate student, so you're doing a project to learn new things that will help us inform polar bear conservation management coexistence. Can you just talk about the process of being a student and how you start a project and ask questions and work together to learn something new?
Yeah, for sure. So I've been doing this for about a year now, and really designing the project. There's so many people out here with bear knowledge and experience, from biologists like Jeff to the community members, and then also the people living with them. What do they know? What do they want to know? Things of that nature. So what we've done is we've partnered with PBI and some other entities to develop these different tools. And really the biggest part of that is getting into these communities and saying, hey, do you know, does this work yet? Or hey, you haven't seen it? Yes, no? Do you care? And a lot of these communities are excited to see what we can come up with. I think just adding tools to our tool belt, and in ways we can coexist with these animals is kind of the key. So we already talked a little bit about the drone. Some of the other things we're looking at is different types of bear spray than what we already see with Jeff. That stuff's very effective. We're looking at, do other chemicals work? Can they work? And would they be more effective in other parts of the world, such as Europe, expanding out there? And then we're looking into the electricity side of things. We know electricity with bears works pretty dang well. But now we're looking at, we've got large scale landscapes or landfills that are electrified, but what we want to see is how can we defend our personal property, such as like a snowmobile or a four-wheeler. Some of these Arctic communities, they get these bears coming in and chewing on the seats of everything, and that's a little destructive, and not a lot of people get happy when they see that. So if we can find a way to protect those types of things, the tolerance for these bears on the landscape goes up, and it all works towards better coexistence.
Absolutely, yeah. I love that process, and I think it's important for students to know that too. It can be fun. It's interesting. People work together. We're always trying to learn new things, ask new questions. How can we figure this out? Well, that didn't work. Well, this really worked. So we want to also show you a clip of something that is working, but we're still refining. So Jeff, we have the electric fence clip being queued up. So talking a little bit through like what happened and what are we looking at in these clips when things work and don't work, what are we learning?
Sure. So in one of the clips we'll show you here, you'll see what happens when the power is off, and that's what you're looking at right now. This is a young bear that's in between the electric fence and the hard fence, and it almost breaches the containment. And this was just a power failure. We were quickly able to figure that out.
Right, and there's garbage in there he's trying to
There's
get.
garbage on the other side of
Yeah.
that chain link fence that the bear really wants to get to. And so we were really lucky this night that the bear didn't get in. And so then the next clip will show you what it looks like when the power's on and how effective electricity can be in deterring wildlife, even from a very strong attractant in this case.
He's thinking about it.
Yeah.
There he
There we go.
goes. Yeah. Right, so that bear was not harmed. We've even had a staff member get zapped by that fence.
couple
He was
of us.
okay. A couple of you have been zapped. So the bear's not harmed, but he gets definitely a negative reinforcement that, oh, I don't want to go in here. And that's better for the bear to not get habituated to garbage. So this is going to keep that bear safer for longer in the wild. So
Yeah, we
an
definitely
important tool.
see once a bear has an experience with the fence, when it approaches again, it tends to come close and then it just walks parallel to the fence
Yes.
and it leaves it alone.
They're very smart and they learn quickly, so that's good news for the polar bears. Okay, we've got a couple more questions here coming in, and please do keep sending them. Jeff, here's one just about Hudson Bay, which I think is great. So does the whole Hudson Bay need to ice over, or will the bears stay close to the shore to travel? And is anyone looking at seals? What's going on with seals?
Yeah, so in terms of ice formation and bear use, like that's why they're here. They're waiting for ice to form. As soon as we get any shelf ice forming, so it could be just a kilometer or less, these bears are on it. They'll be out there testing the ice, they'll be out there looking for food. And we do see, as soon as we get that 1 to 2 kilometers of fast ice just forming near shore, bears start to have success taking seals. I mean, that's something we'll start to see, hopefully, while we're still here. If the weather cools down a bit on that front. And then as far as our people studying seals, absolutely. The Department of Fisheries and Oceans has the lead for that in Canada, but there are also academic partners and others doing different aspects of seal research.
Right, great. So polar bears really want to be eating seals. They really want that seal blubber. That's what they've adapted to eat, that they're blubber hunting ice bears. But when they're stuck on land for long periods of time, that's when we see bears potentially get into garbage or follow their noses to other things that aren't necessarily the best for the bears. They are still bears and they're hungry, but we really hope for that ice to come back so those bears can get out there and start hunting and eating a lot again. Kyle, we've got a question I'll throw to you. This is from Facebook. If someone is coming to see the polar bears in Churchill, do they need to worry about bringing deterrents? How can they stay safe if they visit?
I think the best way to stay safe is linking up with like Frontier North. They have trained guards, they have trained guides that can help you stay safe, and then they'll teach you how to be safe around town when you want to walk around and things like that. So I don't think you necessarily need to bring your own. You could bring a whistle if you'd like, but there's definitely deterrents in town available for people to link up and be safe when they come visit.
Right, coming up with an experienced company or guide is a great way to go. Yeah, they will keep you safe. Great question. Jeff, this is from Kathleen, what is the lifespan of the polar bears on Hudson Bay currently? Maybe you can just talk broadly about this population and what they're facing.
Yeah, and I guess in terms of lifespan, it varies if you're a male or a female, just full stop there. So male polar bears tend to only go, 20 to 25 years old. 25 would be an old male polar bear in the wild. Whereas females can go 30 to 33 years old in the wild. And the reason there's a difference is because males fight each other during breeding time in the spring, and females fight a little bit too with the males. So they just have a harder life on that sense, and those injuries accumulate and they don't live as long.
Right. And what's going on? So we are in the Western Hudson Bay subpopulation of polar bears. There are 20 different populations of polar bears around the globe. These polar bears are a bit special. Of course, they're the most accessible polar bears. So this is the polar bear capital of the world. People come here to see the polar bears. These are the best studied polar bears. So we know a lot about them. And this is the first area that we were able to link changes in climate to changes in polar bears. Jeff, can you talk a bit about the recent knowledge we have about what's going on with these bears here?
Sure. So bears here in Western Hudson Bay today can spend up to a month longer offshore than their parents or grandparents did. And that's pretty significant. We know from new research that even having 5-10 days more in the spring when they have access to young seals for hunting makes a big difference on their body condition coming ashore and their success in reproduction and just survival in general. And so here, with that month less on time, that's translated into lower survival of cubs and fewer bears. So we've seen almost a 50% reduction in this subpopulation over the last 40 years.
Wow, that's a big change.
That's a big change.
Right, and as polar bears experience more stress and pressure on them around the world, then we only are more concerned about human polar bear coexistence. So Kyle, what's next for you in this world? So you're working on your drone project. What do you hope to find out? Or you've worked in the bear world for a long time. So what's next for
I think next is going through all the data, finding out exactly what worked and how well it worked, and publishing papers on it, and then going into communities and teaching them, hey, this is something that we've seen work elsewhere. You might try it here, you might not. But if you do, let us know if it works, and just making sure that people know what's out there, what they can do to minimize removals of these bears and to increase coexistence with them.
Excellent. Yeah, that open dialogue and two-way conversation and doing more listening than talking is really important. Absolutely. And Jeff, for Polar Bears International and coexistence, what's on the horizon?
We're going to continue to work to be a convener, to bring communities and others together. Like you were saying, it's not about us telling people what to do. It's about us sharing the toolbox and people sharing it amongst themselves. We're learning all the time from communities we're working with, from people out on the land. Hey, have you tried this? Like, I've done this with my cap and it's worked well for 10 years. It's like, let's add it to the toolbox.
Yeah. Totally. I love that. Well, thank you both so much for being with us today. Thank you for all your wonderful questions. Please do take our feedback survey. It should be in wherever you're watching, you should see it, or you can go online or look at your registration link for the feedback survey. You will get a free eco adoption if you fill that out. Please also check out what we have going on for the rest of the season. We're going to be out here live streaming polar bears for at least one more week. We'll see when the ice comes in. We'll go longer if the polar bears are here, if we can. We do have another event tomorrow, a live chat about polar bears, so check that out. And thank you for watching. Make sure you're following your curiosity. Ask questions if you're a young student out there. There's so much work still to be done, and we could really use your help. So thanks again, everyone, and we'll play a quick video. Have a great rest of your day. Future generations of people and polar bears depend on the decisions and plans that we make today. A polar bear's life cycle is almost exclusively tied to the sea ice. Because polar bears rely on sea ice to hunt, to breed, and sometimes to den, sea ice loss from climate change is their biggest threat, and the reason the bears are listed as vulnerable on the IUCN's Red List of Threatened Species. What we learn about climate change impacts on polar bears in Hudson Bay can be applied across the Arctic to help conserve other populations. Climate change is already affecting some populations of polar bears. Since we get most of our energy from fossil fuels, we are producing huge amounts of carbon dioxide. You see, regular amounts of carbon dioxide in the atmosphere act like a blanket around the Earth, trapping heat and keeping our planet at a stable temperature. However, when we burn fossil fuels like coal, oil, and natural gas for energy, we pump rampant amounts of carbon dioxide into the atmosphere. This buildup thickens the blanket, trapping too much heat, disrupting the climate, and melting Arctic sea ice. When Arctic waters are cold enough, the top layer freezes into a special type of ice called sea ice. Sea ice is to the ocean what soil is to a forest. It supports the entire Arctic food chain. Food from this marine ecosystem also sustains northern communities. The key to getting the climate back to functioning the way it should, and to preserving a future for polar bears across the Arctic, is to move away from using fossil fuels for energy altogether. The most important thing we can do is vote with the climate in mind to let our leaders know we support a swift transition to renewable energy sources. In the meantime, we can directly participate in and learn more about our local and regional renewable energy options. We can all make a difference outside our own households by influencing where our energy comes from. Because together, we can make sure that polar bears roam the Arctic sea ice for generations to come.